Hey folks, welcome.
Good morning. Welcome in to Inside the Panel. We're going to be bringing you all this wonderful news in the world of comics.
Nate, we were talking, and it's been interesting because for you, it's been a bit of a journey learning more about the comic space. You professionally, a magician, operationally work with 24/7 Comics that do all kinds of cool stuff. As kind of a noob in comics, there's always a lot of questions, and so we thought, why don't we just bring this to the audience and really make this a bit of a live taping? And so those of you who are tuning in today on the stream, this is a live taping. We're not going to promote this stream, but it's really a taping for the show itself that will drop every Monday. And the concept is really simple. We're going to be basically reviewing the biggest news in comics for the week, and then we'll do a quick recap for those who are tuning in. So it's very experimental, and it's going to be really fun. And the idea is whatever I can do to answer any questions that Nate and potentially other folks on our team may have, the audience get to also chime in as well. And so it'll be a fun one. We're gonna keep it quick, not too crazy. Hello, Jane. Hello, Mary at 24/7 Comics, also tuning in. So as we mentioned, the whole team will be tuning in, and we'll be having a lot of fun talking about different topics. So I myself, I'm Carl Choi. I am the publisher of 24/7 Comics. I'll pass to Nate.
Hey, Magic Nate here. I work operationally with 24/7 Comics, professional magician, and innovator in the escape room world. Ooh, ah.
Ah.
Do you want to talk about one of the craziest things that's been happening lately and probably the biggest upset in the world of comic books?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's been it's no secret now, but for those of you who are just tuning in, Diamond Distribution, known as Diamond Comics, they also own a few other distribution companies, including TCG and Toys and Gaming. They declared Chapter 11 bankruptcy. This came as a bit of a shock to most people, only because Diamond has had a monopoly stronghold on the comic book industry for probably 30 plus years now. Not sure how much you guys know about it, Nate. What's your knowledge of kind of Diamond and its presence in the comic book industry?
From what I understand, is that Diamond has actually been home for some Marvel, DC, and a handful of others, as well as independent publishing houses, in helping distribute and get the those titles out to the public. Am I on point with that? Am I close to it?
You're totally on point, and not just Marvel, DC. If you see here, a company called IDW, which was kind of going through their own thing. Public company. They actually at one point owned a lot of the big licenses, like Transformers and whatnot, GI Joe, and they themselves were going through some issues. But as you see in this article, the Diamond bankruptcy is creating this cascade effect, not just for the Marvel and DCs of the world, which you just touch on and we'll get to later, but also a cascading effect for kind of the tier B and C publishers. I wouldn't even put us in the tier. We're just a startup, right? But IDW has been around for many years. They had already, as a public company, been going through a lot of layoffs, and it looked like they would now be owed substantial cash value from Diamond due to this whole bankruptcy issue.
Definitely, and it's kind of scary to see that something a conglomerate that like Diamond uh, file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. What do you think this means for a lot of independent publishers and the smaller creators out there who utilized Diamond?
It's gonna be really tough. I think, for example, we have our friends over at Dynamite. They were distributed through Diamond as well. They had a great year. They launched Thundercats, Silverhawks. I think the Disney titles like Scrooge McDuck did really well on those. And because they had such a great year, typically the way it works is there's a solicitation process where Diamond would say, all right, these books are coming out from Dynamite, from 24/7 Comics, from Marvel, from DC. And what happens is Diamond actually collects the dollars, and then they would basically hold on to those dollars and then in turn pay the publishers. Now, given Chapter 11, what's going to happen is all their debts are cleared, meaning the publishers will actually not get paid for their last 6 to 9 months of sales, which could be crippling to a smaller operation, especially one like ourselves, right? Like it would totally just like hurt us pretty bad because we don't have a huge bankroll, like Papa Disney had, like Marvel has for Papa Disney, or DC has with Mama Warner, right? And
Mhm.
so, kind of speaking of Marvel and DC, I do want to kind of touch on how this whole thing uh, you know sort of started. So basically, it kind of goes back 5 years. In 2020, when the pandemic happened, obviously, I think we're all in a place of shock, and that's not different than most of the comic book industry, as everyone was wondering, like, what the heck are we gonna do? But what happened was, at the time, Diamond was the only go-to distributor. Can you imagine that, Nate? I mean, that's a monopoly.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I read also somewhere, probably from the same news source, that uh, Mile High Comics, their their leader, what's his name, Chuck, I believe, Chuck Ryansky, right, something like that.
Yeah,
Anyway, he actually contacted the Department of Justice to investigate Diamond Comics, from what I understand, about having this monopoly both over the industry as a whole through distribution and publishing, as well as a monopoly over the readers themselves. Uh, from what I understand, the DOJ decided not to go with any actions, um, just because they didn't want to. They didn't know how to pursue any justice upon Diamond, but the DOJ did recognize that Diamond had this crazy monopoly in the space.
they did. And what that kind of cause was basically them saying the rules, right? If you want to be in comics, like, you have to be in bed with Diamond. But at the same time, when the pandemic came along, they basically made this decision to shut down for indefinite amount of months. I think it lasted for about 3 or 4 months, but ultimately, what that forced the larger publishers to do was to find their own way to distribute. And that happened with DC first. And DC basically worked with a company called Lunar. In a way, they kind of helped form Lunar. And they started figuring out their own distribution. And truthfully, it was pretty tough for a lot of you know the retailers to adjust to that, because imagine, like, you've kind of had a system set up for like 20 years, right? I would say all the surviving comic book shops pretty much have been around for that long because they've been able to survive through the ups and downs. And all of a sudden, what, you have to change the way these books are being fed to me and the way my ordering system is. And there was a lot of like disgruntled effects from that. And people had to order from two places. Then shortly after that, Marvel was like, "Hey, we're not gonna, wait around if DC's doing that." So they jumped to Penguin Random House, and obviously there was a lot of like, learning curves because early on, Penguin, they actually did not ship comic books, so a lot of comic books were shipped damaged, and so a lot of retailers were actually quite angry, and so basically those two major moves was what kind of create this kind of cascading effect. And it's surprisingly it's taking this long, but at the same time not so surprised, because when you have monopoly, you also have a huge cash reserve. So I feel like Diamond's been kind of struggling for a bit now, and the cash reserves are finally running out, and 4.5 5 years later, it was time to declare bankruptcy. And the other one that was heavily impacted was also Boom.
That's right. And from that article, we saw that Boom actually went to Penguin 3 months early, because their contract should have been up sometime during the summer. And from what I understand, like, that's kind of a sketchy transition to go through, jumping from one distribution center to another. especially when your contract is supposed to continue on at the other side of it. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, one thing you might not know is last year there was a transaction that happened where Penguin Random House purchased Boom. So basically, this was on its way. So basically, Boom was distributed through Diamond, and then Boom also has a lot of great licenses as well. In fact, they're the ones that inherited Magic the Gathering. A little preview to our other topic later, which is one of the largest TCG games. Boom actually now published Magic the Gathering comics, and basically, there's a few things. A friend Philippe, who was one of the kind of faces for Boom Comics, he had signal a resignation, and then shortly after, which was very surprising because he's the man. And then shortly after, they announced the sale to Penguin. With the way the industry was working over the last 3 years, there was also a lot of complications because I think there was also some documentation in the process that shared that Penguin Random House was also a creditor to Boom, and so I think there was some debts owed where then that was leveraged to purchase and acquire Boom. So it's not a surprise that Penguin would actually now be distributing Boom. It was just a matter of time.
Hmm. Gotcha. And so then in this case with the Chapter 11 bankruptcy and all of the controversy going on between uh, the different IPs that are going on with that utilized Diamond, what do you see is happening or will happen in the future in regards to these fantastic IPs that are out there, or the smaller independent publishers and uh, people who utilized Diamond? What's going to happen to them, or what do you predict would happen?
Yeah, there was a really good podcast called the Robservation Podcast, which is Rob Liefeld, the creator of Deadpool, as well as Youngblood, and he had Robert Kirkman on here this week. And one thing they did talk about was this exact same question: what are some of these independent publishers going to do? And in fact, Robert Kirkman shared how early on, when he started getting into independently published comics himself, he had this comic called Battle Pope, and he had to go to Diamond Distribution. They would distribute maybe 8 to 900 copies, and then through that they would basically, he would have to market himself to the stores who would then market him. And to him, he thinks Kickstarter has kind of replaced that process and has done so for a long time now, meaning new publishers like ourselves or independent comic creators can now go on Kickstarter and have a direct access to the audience. And you're seeing some of that even when we talked about Boom earlier. One of the largest comic book Kickstarters to date was during the pandemic when they had partnered with Keanu Reeves to launch Berserker, and I think they did like a few million. I mean, let's see, Keanu Kickstarter, yeah, Berserk. Let me share the screen. They did a good amount of volume for that one. Let's see, campaign. They did $1.4 million, and so that was that was Boom, and with 14,000 backers, right? So there's something really special to be said here, especially because someone like a Keanu, I'm not sure how much comic stuff he did before all this, but due to the success of this Kickstarter, it kind of put Boom on the map. And then on top of that, Boom also then leveraged this to get Berserker set up at Netflix. So from what I know, there's a whole development going on with this whole Berserker universe, and it's fun because Keanu is heavily involved, and definitely gives us a lot of a hope to how comics can kick off IP. But hopefully, people are creating good comics first, which is one of our missions at 24/7 Comics. And at the end of the day, too, fast forward a few years later, they still had to get acquired by Penguin Random House. So just because you do a huge campaign doesn't mean it's easy to navigate this whole comic book industry. But let's go to Jane. There's some questions as well. Yeah, Jane asks, is there going to be will this lead to new distribution methods? I think so. I think Comics Pro is coming up at the end of February, which is a conference that all the retailers, publishers, and distributors get together on. I think this whole diamond topic will be one of the biggest topics to be discussed. And then second to that, I think people are gonna have to announce new ways to distribute. So for example, one of the ones that uh, let's see, direct distribution was Vault Comics. So basically, like a few days after, the whole Diamond announcement, Vault announces its direct to retailer wholesale distribution. Timing, some people question if it was, a little too soon, right? Because some of the retailer Facebook groups, was not super happy about it because, like I mentioned, retailers uh, are used to a certain process, and all of a sudden now that they signed up for another route. And so, will this be it for everyone in the distribution space? Maybe, but maybe not.
I mean, that's a good point. Another option that we could explore, uh, we could take the world's chihuahuas and train them how to navigate the inner tunnels of the world and take the comics to each consumer because chihuahuas are half dog, half rat anyway, and allow them to expand that network of direct to consumer.
Chihuahuas or cyber chihuahuas, why not, right? Like a part drone, part chihuahua. And I don't know if you saw that video, but like Chinese New Year had like kind of a cyber dog dance in China somewhere, and everyone's like, "Oh my god, mechs are taking over."
Really? Huh. I mean, I guess you could do like a cyber chihuahua because then, I mean, chihuahuas are loud and obnoxious, so you can hear them coming from a mile away. So you'll
Yeah,
know when your comic shows up.
here it is. Can you hear the volume? But basically, this is a lion dance with mech dogs. But just a fun little tidbit that we came across.
Huh, that's interesting.
What's up, Southern Comic Geek? And let's get to Jane's question. And some comic shops struggle or even close because of Diamond's bankruptcy. Maybe. Let me think. It will impact the line. I did stop by my local comic book shop yesterday, Comics Factory, and I did ask them what their feelings were, and their response was kind of a pause, and then they said, "We'll see," because I think during this holiday season, another kind of announcement leading up to this was. Diamond was closing one of the distribution centers. And so, when was this? Yeah, so Plattsburgh, which is one of the larger kind of northeastern distribution centers, is close to the Canadian border. So, what happens is a lot of books are actually printed in Canada. And they had closed this November 20th of 2024, right before the holiday season, which for a lot of the comic book shops and retailers is probably the busiest season, right? And so they shut this down. And from what I heard, a lot of books were actually late for the holiday season. So Jane, to answer your question, there was some impact leading up to this, but I'm actually not sure how it's gonna work for retailers. If anything else, I think it's gonna impact the publishers more because Diamond has already collected the cash for the inventory, and they are holding the inventory. But I think the publishers are now gonna have to eat it on both sides, meaning they've already shipped their inventory to Diamond to store, and then at the same time, Diamond's already collecting the money on their behalf. And so, publishers, I'm not exactly sure what's gonna happen with their inventory. Do they get shipped back to them? If they get shipped back to them, then it's going to be additional cost to store that inventory. But one thing we know is Chapter 11 excuses Diamond from having to pay anyone back. And so now the money that's been collected is debt forgiven. So it's a bit of a thing. So we'll see if it really trickles down to the retailers or not.
Absolutely. That's kind of one of the scariest things, especially for those smaller publishers and creators out there, is that they've essentially lost some money and uh, don't really know how to recuperate that, or maybe they're not capable of recuperating that right now. especially with this opportunity or with this whole thing happening with Diamond distribution going down and filing for that bankruptcy.
Well, I mean, we cover a lot on this topic. Any other questions, Nate?
Uh, no, but I do have another piece of news for everybody watching. Thank you for watching, everybody at home. Just letting you know that the other day it was reported that a man swallowed a small toy horse. After visiting the hospital, all the doctors did say his condition was stable.
Oh my God. That's definitely a piece of news that we should all tune into for sure. And glad he was okay. Cool. So I think the next kind of bit of news that we wanted to touch on was just the popularity of gaming and comics. So what did you read about?
Within the gaming world, there is this crazy growing cult. I'll call it a growing cult of comic books and the whole gaming space kind of increasing. Now, mainly this is happening with the online games or from your mobile phone to things you can get on Steam. I personally am not a gamer, but there's also some interesting tidbits in this article talking about virtual reality and immersive experiences, which, given my background and work in the escape room industry, immersive experiences plus comic books sounds like an amazing crossover and something that should be happening more and more often. What's been cool within this whole crossover is that we've seen a major increase all across the board in I think it's supposed to hit something northwards of like $250 billion with a giant B uh, in 2025. This whole global gaming market to be able to take these IPs and transform them into an experience for people across the globe to actually enjoy. What are your thoughts on this, Carl? Like, especially coming from the other side where you're comics based, I come from the side of game based uh, interactivity. Like, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I also came from immersive experience. I was a producer for a number of years, so I understand where you're coming from. I think that my immediate thought was interesting, just seeing this comparison where the gaming industry is at this $250 billion market cap, while comic books 1.28 billion. So it's like 250 times that of comics. So one, a lot more people play games. But what you're talking about with the immersive experience was like a niche within a niche, right? It's almost like what's interesting is when it comes to gaming, like what are they encapsulating? Are they talking about console games? They're talking about PC games. There's TCG games like Magic the Gathering. There's like escape room games. So that's a big question mark there. But comic books are comic books, right? I think if anything, it's kind of moved into different genres. I'm also kind of curious if that includes manga sales, because I do feel like manga does do some serious volume. When you walk into a Barnes and Noble, you probably see manga section being like 20x the size of the comic book graphic novel section. So does that mean manga did 20 billion? I don't know. So, or is that all inclusive? So that's kind of the top thought, just the general size of it. Second thought is, and this is something we covered during TLDR, which we're streaming tomorrow. Southern Comic Geek, if you're still here, him and I does a stream, every so often called TLDR, and we talk a lot about Valiant, the Valiant universe, which is a imprint that we love and grew up to love. But if I was to look up Valiant video games comics, you will see that this is not very new under the sun. And so if you look at the comics that they published, they also published, you know, um, a lot of the Nintendo games. And so they did Nintendo, they did also games for Iron Man and Exo Man of War, Torque. So what happened was Valiant Comics, which if you guys tune to TLDR on our channel, they first started with Nintendo, etc. But then over the course of their growth, they got acquired by Acclaim Games, and through the acquisition, they started taking some of the IP that they've created and turned them into comic books. And Torok, I think, was one of the most popular one. Uh, let's see, licenses. Uh, okay, right now everything I'm searching is basically coming up as Valiant Games licensed to comics, but I'm trying to think of like what to search. Early video game comics by Valiant. So maybe I'll just look at the wiki. That's probably the most reliable. So basically, early Valiant, Jim Shooter, Voyager Communications, Magnus. So they licensed Magnus, Gold Key. But what I was trying to get at is they basically licensed Nintendo comics, like all the superhero, all the like Super Mario comics, etc. was was done at Valiant, and so that's kind of how they kicked off what they do. So it's kind of funny because if you look at even just like Google search, it's completely buried, right? Um, unless you go on like a CGC forum. Here you go. Nintendo. Someone asked a question of like, hey, like, who published their early books? And it's kind of cool, right? You see the Nintendo logo next to the Valiant logo because Valiant actually published all the Nintendo comics. So there's Super Mario, Valiant, and so they really kicked off their fan base with some of these early Valiant comics. With their Nintendo IP. So I guess there's nothing new under the sun. I think gaming and comics have always been like a thing. And Torok, Marcus, that was like a big one. I think they did about 3 books, three different comics. Sorry, 3 different video games was made from the whole Torok IP.
Definitely. Happy
Heroes,
Friday, Arelis.
happy Friday. We're gonna do this
Uh,
every Friday. There's a live taping, folks, for those tuning in. Live taping for our weekly show, Weekend Comics, and basically it'll drop every Monday and recapping news that happened last week.
and so back on this topic of the intersection between games and comics, I I know this article was talking about or giving examples within virtual reality, mobile apps, AR games, kind of merging the two mediums. And it may not be anything new, but there has been a significant increase in the crossovers. Are there any IPs that you think should or do belong in the gaming world, whether it's TCG or an escape room or a mobile fight game? I know that there's like that Marvel, what do you call it?
Snap, Marvel Snap, and then the most recent ones.
Yes.
What's the new one? Like the Marvel game that's huge right now.
Is it Snap or is it I don't
Marvel
remember.
Rivals. Marvel
There you go,
Rivals.
Rivals.
That's the big one right
We
now.
all see the ads for those
Yeah.
like on some videos at times for Marvel Rivals. What are some IPs or some opportunities that you think need to happen in the between the comic world and the gaming world?
I think they've tried like okay, so basically any IP in the gaming space, I'm trying to think of all the big ones and then which ones have not been done yet. I feel like I've seen every big game you could name on a newsstand. So like, or some recent ones like Sonic the Hedgehog. I've definitely seen that done through IDW. I've definitely seen like our one of our creators, one of our founding creators, Justin Jordan. He did all the Call of Duty comics. But one thing I would say, less about what comics needs to be made of gaming IP, but more so like a more intentional integration as to the role that comics play in a particular IP. So why I say that is because I did also used to work with Wizards of the Coast when we used to be in the whole immersive business. We used to service Hollywood and their studios on creating immersive experiences, and Wizards of the Coast was one of our clients. And so learning how they work made me realize there's a lot of room for kind of cross media pollination and collaboration. And what that means is,
Mhm.
Magic, they think, 3 to 4 years out. So by the time we see a particular set that comes out, they worked on that 2, 3 years ago. So they're way ahead of the game when it comes to like designing the game, the core competency. But the way the kind of IP business model was set up, and they would call this a franchise, right? For a particular title. So like Pokemon is a franchise. Any title like Spider-Man under Marvel is a franchise. Marcus says we even got Fortnite comics and DC. And
Mm.
so, there's all kinds of crossover and licenses that happens. Now, these franchises, the way it works then is often in business, they try to focus in what their core competency, right? But what happens is they would then license out their IP to other companies with core competencies. One being, like I mentioned, Transformers is owned by Hasbro. GI Joe also owned by Hasbro. They're toys, right? And so what they would do is they would license their IP to IDW, which happened for many years, maybe like 10 plus years, and then recently to Skybound. Now, the major difference is I felt like with IDW, they kind of went off and just did their own thing. They hired a bunch of folks, told stories. There was no continuity between the toys and the story. But where Skybound did a good job on was they brought on a very relevant artist. They collaborate closely with Hasbro, and they had an alignment with the way their storytelling was and their release with the toy release and the direction of where they're going. So with that alignment, the audience just feels it, and they've completely blown up and sold probably like by now millions of copies of Transformers and the new title. So I do feel like kind of strategic alignment and more intentional ways would be great. And kind of going back to Wizards, when we were working with them back in 2018-19, right before pandemic, I knew the producing team that was working on the Magic the Gathering show. Was really interesting, and I could talk about this now because I know they've changed teams. The way I met the team member was at the local comic book store, local game store. I sat down. This guy sits down, and totally did not fit in the context of the regular gamers. He sat down and basically tells everyone he's producing the show and he needs to learn how to play the game. So to me, I scratched my head right away. It's like, why would you have someone that don't know how to play the game produce the show, right? Because obviously they're not caught up to the ethos of what this game's about. And then two, they're learning from ground up. So you're having someone with a learning curve producing a show right there and then there's a misalignment. And I think when fans see this show, they're gonna know that, right? And I think that's kind of why they, a couple years later, changed production companies. So I think there's a lot of room for that, just for
Mhm.
IP managers and franchise managers to look beyond the numbers, the minimum guarantees. They call it MGs. Uh, those numbers are great for like a scaling business back in the day when like there's only one Cinderella story. But now the consumers are more sophisticated. We care about stories at every level of consumption. And so I think it's going to be up to franchise managers and brands to make sure that all those stories are aligned in every media platform, no matter if it shows up on TikTok, shows up in toys, shows up in comics, etc.
That makes sense. It just like personally speaking, I know with working with a couple of different IPs, I don't think I'm allowed to still say who I worked with on the company. But we are working, like, I have worked with a certain uh, set of owners in the escape room space. And there is like a famous video game that actually became, what was it, a graphic novel slash whole like storyline series. And then now people are trying to figure out how best to fit it into an actual IRL immersive space, which is very interesting. It's been kind of like a crazy adventure. And if you guys are watching this, put your guesses down in the comments below or in the chat. Let us know what you think that IP is, because I want to see if you can guess right. If you do get it right, you get a high five. You get a Magic Nate high five. There you go. Uh, but I'd love to see more and more of these things happen, especially if the industry is going to be growing anyway.
Yeah,
Uh, Not just as a mobile app or anything on the Steam store, but I'd love to see where this can go in real life. Like, I'd love to, I know I'm kind of biased because I'm part of the team, but I'd love to do like a special puzzle box or like a 30-minute escape room to be able to set up at conventions or pop-ups uh, featuring like the Zero Ghost IP with 24/7 Comics. And if you guys watching haven't checked out Zero Ghost, please be sure to go to 247comics.com to the store, get yourself a copy of that. Here, that I know, shameless plug, but I think Zero Ghost has an amazing story that would translate really well into some sort of interactive opportunity for people to come in, kind of break away from the everyday. Um, but it's kind of interesting to see how I'm not a video game person myself. Um, I'm really bad at them. I don't have the coordination or patience for video games, and I'm sorry for you people out there watching who actually do like video games. It's just not my thing, but I enjoy watching other people play, and I understand the video game industry has always been on the rise. But this article really touching on the idea between comics and gaming crossing over. Um, and yes, Jane, I agree. Evermind would be a great PC game. I'd watch that. I know a lot of people would probably play that too. It's
for sure. It'd be like our version of Sims.
yeah. Oh, that's
Uh,
another good one. Uh, it's really awesome to see how two very strong industries in their own respects can just keep climbing and climbing, especially together. I know X-Men, like various types of X-Men games have come out. Uh,
sure.
what was it? The Sega Genesis, for those who remember what the Sega Genesis is, uh, to PlayStation and now online games. X-Men's been one of those IPs that's lasted forever, and it started as comic books. What are your thoughts, Carl, on anything that, I mean, 24/7 has some great IPs. Is there anything that you would like to see turned into a game, whether it's an escape room, whether it's a augmented reality thing, a virtual reality mobile app, trading card game?
I think so. I think what's cool about gaming is it brings people back, right? Like when you have a game that's engaging, and has and challenges folks to build a skill set to grow. I think people do come back, and so yeah, I think one day I would love to see some of our IP turn to games. I think the goal here is to build an audience first, right? Like if we could have a audience, a community that also see what we see, then it gives a lot more motivation to let's say what you mentioned earlier, like let's do a pop-up at San Diego Comic Con, because I think people actually want to experience this, right? So yeah, I think like everything that we make, we think a lot about adaptation in the long run, but we don't necessarily do it for the adaptation, if that makes sense. I think, one thing that crosses my mind a lot is, just the understanding of what's the strength of each format. So, for example, immersive experiences are really great for kind of multi-sensory type format, but
Hmm.
it's probably not great to tell an origin story of a character, right? So because what happens is, in uh, in a lot of like consumption, like feature film, for example, it's a very passive uh, consumption format where the director of the movie tells a story through the lens of a protagonist, and us as uh, you know observers are following the journey through the eyes of the protagonist. When it comes to immersive experience, it's fully in the hands of the participant, where they are the protagonist. And as kind of immersive designers, we are designing the environment that guides them through their own journey and their own experience and the story they want to tell in their head. Comics is a passive active medium because uh, as much as these are different art panels and written language and dialogue, you and I may read a comic book and come up with a complete different story, a different perspective. Because what happens is between panels of art, we have to use our imagination to connect the dots and think about how these actions work. How you see action might be totally different than how I see action. Like for example, Bladesmith. I know you and Mary, you guys like to cook. So when you guys see the food in Bladesmith, there's a different kind of connection because chances are you guys probably could smell it, could see it, could see the textures. I see it and it's just food on paper because the kitchen is not my natural habitat. And so I prefer to be in the ring, boxing. I prefer to play airsoft and be running the field. So the fight scenes actually speak to me a lot more because I
Mhm.
understand when the punch is coming at me and how I need to dodge it. I understand when I swing and what the action then looks like. In fact, I have a bunch of feedback from my friend Tom McDonald on the Bladesmith comic. So I need to. This is a quick reminder for me to share that feedback on the action pieces. But yeah, so I think what's really powerful about comics and why it serves really well actually to tell an origin story of a character is because it's the perfect format to create that passive involvement and contribution from the readers, right? So kind of how comics form and how characters form over time is one established by the writer and the artist, who to me is the director and cinematographer. But over time, as the character evolves, there's a lot of community feedback, community contribution that forms that character, and that's why you see such deep emotional connection to Batman, deep
Mhm.
emotional connection to Spider-Man, because there was a lot of feedback that formed the character over the course of like decades, right? So yeah, I think that's why comics are so powerful as a medium. And at the end of the day, I think there's a lot uh, more of an integrated opportunity for franchise rights holders and IP
Mhm.
holders to make sure all their different mediums are aligned.
Definitely, and, like, just because it's where my expertise lies in the immersive space, like, one of the coolest things that I it's actually become a more frequent conversation than I'd like to admit is, some friends of mine were joking about looking for, a Batman escape room, and I can tell you in the world and within the continental US, we have exactly 2 Batman-themed escape rooms, that are actually, based on the comic books, not the movies. Um, and I believe one of them is in California and the other one's, like, South Dakota? Just somebody somewhere random. Uh, my friend, Teresa, shout out to you, Teresa, hi. Uh, her and her partner run the Great Gotham Challenge in New York, which is pretty amazing. Oh, there you go, Batman Escape.
Have you seen this? Batman Escape. I only know about this because I saw the original art for sale, and it was awesome. But I didn't know what it was, and I was like, oh, there's an escape room. But this is actually a thing.
Oh,
It's in
yeah,
France.
100%.
Yeah, it's in France.
Uh, the what's really cool about it is a lot of these opportunities come straight from the comic IPs and not necessarily just from the popularized movies that are out there. Uh, and a lot of these can be marked as an escape room because there will be puzzle elements or what we'll call puzzle elements. But these days, and hopefully one day we could do a full stream on just nerding out about the escape room side of things. But um, nowadays, escape rooms aren't just go in, undo a bunch of cheesy locks on IKEA furniture and move on. But instead, we've hit the point of immersive experiences really taking hold and trying to draw people into a specific world.
Mm,
Like down in Florida, there's Captain Spoopy Bones, which is a an incredible room that mimics the whole comic book style, but putting it into a 3D space. And they have another game there that quite literally freaks you out because everything feels like it's flattened. The way that they've painted everything and just kind of designed their props makes it feel like you're in comic book panels and
that's
everything
cool.
has been 2D. So there is this amazing crossover happening within the immersive world because we'll expand it outside of escape rooms and turn it into immersive world and the comic book industry where now they're looking to kind of copy one another. Uh, I love the idea that there's this growing opportunity as people want more and more to make these types of things accessible in different mediums to share different types of culture and art with each other. Uh, I think it's I think it's pretty neat. And those of you watching, actually let us know in the comments uh, the most if we were to make a video game with the most useless superhero, who would it be, and what kind of video game would we do? Um, it could be Captain Underpants. It could be the Green Lantern. That's entirely up to you guys what you think should happen. But if this is going to make things a little more uh, in touch with the art, like, oh,
Of course,
Cyclops.
Marcus. Apparently, people get Cyclops messed up all the time because there's been just like ongoing artist renditions of Cyclops, like barbecuing stuff. But his laser is not like it's like a light driven laser. It's like an optic laser, so it actually is not heated. Like so, it's really funny. There's a ongoing like debate and like misunderstanding of his powers. So I thought that was pretty funny as well. And Mary loves Captain Underpants, and uh, I guess your comment was a little offensive, Nate.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mary. I'm sorry for offending you with my Captain Underpants reference. Would Captain Underpants count as a comic book?
It is comic book. It's a YA comics, and so it definitely leans on the younger side. But it would be considered a comic book for sure.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Would just imagine that a Captain Underpants video game.
I could see that. I could definitely see that as a thing. I wouldn't be surprised if it exists already, right?
Uh, Anybody watching, if you have played a Captain Underpants game, please let us know.
There is. It's
Uh,
called the Captain Underpants Epic first epic game. It's actually a first epic
really?
movie. Game is a new game based on the movie. Okay, so basically, what happens is just kind of explain the business in the back end. Often, what happens is, as a studio, when we option an IP for feature film, if the film does well or like there's certain triggers, like if it like released in X theaters, we also get the gaming rights, and often that's kind of how you make your money is through the gaming rights, and so yeah. I think Marcus also said there's a Dogman video game, which is the number one selling comic book in the nation, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's responsible for a lot of that $1.28 billion because Dogman is crazy, and I'll tell you why it's crazy is Dogman and Captain Underpants. They're YA, that means young adult, so they're very educational friendly. So not only are you going to the comic book shops, you're going into the big box retailers like Barnes and Noble, you're going into like Walmart and Target, but you're also going into libraries. So all of a sudden, you're in every city across the nation, And on top of that, you're now in all the schools. So kids are allowed to read this stuff as kind of like their break time, or even sometimes I think teachers use it for education. So you're in every school too. So Captain Underpants and Dogman, I mean, they make Marvel and DC look like, child's play, and so there's a whole world there as well. But yeah, I do feel like there's plenty of room for them to have games.
That's so interesting. Dogman. Okay, I'm gonna admit I don't know what a Dogman is. Uh, Marcus, thanks for letting us know that the same guy created both. Mary, yeah, I absolutely remember reading Captain Underpants in school or at the library. Same. That's the only I mean, I haven't thought of Captain Underpants in over 20 years, but um, yeah, Captain Underpants would make sense too. I, but that's interesting to learn that it does count as a comic or a young adult comic. Um, and you're right, it is kind of education friendly. I I'm sure there are going to be other things out there that could transform into this space. Uh, what was it? I remember seeing a debate also of superheroes. Uh, what was it? Aquaman versus was it Aquaman versus Green Lantern? And just seeing who would
Oh yeah, Aquaman versus Namor. Namor,
Namer. There
Namor,
you go.
Namor is the other kind of I forget who was first, but then yeah, there's always tons of those. There's like uh, you know, was it Thanos versus the DC version of Thanos. I mean, there's like a version of everyone like Daredevil and Batman, right? Like they kind of have that same feel. So
Hmm.
yeah, the verses are a whole. We should have a whole show on that. I mean, that could be a whole topic. But one thing before I forget is, I mentioned earlier that the reason I found out about this whole like Batman game was the original art, and then I found it. I just found that the original art was for sale, and it really caught my attention. I was like, wow, this thing is freaking awesome. And I just didn't know who the artist was. But gaming art is a thing. This guy, Anthony Jean, and, it sold for almost 8 grand. And so, no joke, but it's also a really big piece. So, like, you could totally imagine it being great right behind me. But obviously, I didn't win that one. But speaking of original art, Nate, if I may, I wanted to kind of talk about the big news in comics this week, which we're going to cover at our TLDR stream tomorrow. So this is more of a preview. But yeah, and why it's relevant is because at this year's OAX, you guys can watch this video yourself. It's Epic Day 1 at 2025 Original Art Expo at Spidey Hits. Spidey Hits, I'll turn the volume off, but basically Spidey Hits, he's a great guy, super positive, really big in the kind of comic Marvel cards world. But speaking of gaming, we also had like and then OAX is the Original Art Expo, which focuses on original art, which is kind of the comic art that I just showed you guys. But what was really interesting this year is there was a Marvel uh, Magic the Gathering crossover, and because of that, it's created an influx of interest for Magic the Gathering. And so my friend Steve and I, we end up and Tatiana. So Steve and I are playing here. Ended up hosting a Magic the Gathering, amateurs night and training night. And when we were waiting for people, we decided to start playing with some of his decks. And we'll talk more about this tomorrow at TLDR. But man, like these decks were Steve's, and he's a very successful entrepreneur, and they're alpha decks. And you'll see in the video how all of us are kind of like, oh my God, these are alpha decks. So basically, the two decks that we're holding in our hands, the two gray decks here, you see, they're probably estimated like $500,000 each in value. So we're literally playing with like someone's house on in our hands during this game, and so this is a perfect kind of description of a crossover, meaning Magic the Gathering licensed from Marvel the cards, and obviously I think they had uh, you know they all know about the comic book IP. So they actually applied really really cool um, gaming aesthetics to each of the characters. So, like for example, the deck that I built was Captain America, and Captain America in the Magic game has the ability to throw stuff, like to throw equipment, and these equipments can bounce off different characters and do damages. And so that in itself has kind of brought in this whole new audience of card basically comic book lovers into Magic the Gathering games. So I think we're going to see more and more of these crossovers in the days to come. But I wanted to paint an example of how comic books and games can cross over in a really powerful way. I mean, when it comes to adaptation, Mickey Finnegan, who's also the creative director at 24/7 Comics, also talked about on his Swagger House channel the recent controversy of Anthony Mackie's comment on how Captain America doesn't really have to represent, America, which I think is a huge question mark. Obviously, Chris Evans had his own saying to this as well. I'll leave it to you guys to cover this. But another, kind of major note when it comes to sorry guys, that's what happens with live taping. We get uh doorbells and dogs barking. uh but anyways, going back to this, another note on how adaptation somehow can get lost in translation. So I don't know how much Anthony Mackie has read comics, but there's a lot of backlash on this as well. And the last part about kind of preview is, in art itself, there's also kind of the fantasy world where you have a comic book channel like Comics Den now taking a lot of interest in art, and they literally talk about how dealers are showing up with millions in art. And Mr. Frazetta, this painting itself, I think was like the cost of it was $700,000 at this expo. So it just and our friend from the comics den, they're holding on to this with their own hand, and dealer literally just holding on to it like no big deal. So it just shows how there's like ongoing crossovers across the board between gaming and comics. But yeah, a little example and preview as to what we'll probably be covering tomorrow during our TLDR episode.
That makes a lot of sense. It's pretty cool to see um, how these crossovers are happening. Um, and yes, I saw Marcus. You said Black Lotus. Uh, Not to brag, but somewhere in my storage back home, I heard that Black Lotus is somehow like super popular these days. I still have, I believe, two of them in my deck binder thing from back when I used to play Magic. Is that
Oh
a
my
good
god.
thing?
It's a great thing. I mean, you should. Which one? White border or black borders?
Uh, one of each, just because I was always developing that swamp deck,
Mm,
um, and people knew how we all played back in the day. So I collected a mainly, it was a black and green deck is what I was always doing, and I believe Black Lotus. I have two of them. I can see one with a black border very clearly. I believe the other one might have a white border on it. I don't
okay.
know if that's valuable. I heard people are all up in arms about the Black Lotus cards these days. If you know, please let us know in the comments. Please teach me.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking to buy like a I don't know what your status is, but if you need like an engagement ring or something, you could definitely uh exchange that with the white border. And then if you need depending on the condition of your black border one, you may be able to buy yourself a new car or a new house. So definitely
Oh,
look into that.
really?
Yeah.
Yes. That's actually really exciting. Uh, and in other news for those watching as well, it was reported that the current president decided to bring pumpkins into the White House in a specific in a specific meeting place to make sure his board members all were aware of this different sizes of pumpkins. Uh, it is now known as the presidential gourd room.
You know what? With the current president today, like I wouldn't know if that was a joke or if that was serious, because anything's possible. Which honestly, like, makes it very entertaining to be American right now. I do feel
Yeah,
like there's a whole kind of love-hate scenario we're in right now globally. But with that said, I think that's our live taping for episode 1 of the Week in Comics. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We cover all the news we can. I think every week we're going to have maybe different folks within our team come on as well, just to ask questions, talk about what we're doing, talk about, comic news. And so today we got coverage on both the bankruptcy with Diamond, which we'll follow up later in a future episode, as well as kind of gaming and comics. If there's any other news, please submit to us. Our email address is hello@247comics.com. And then Magic Nate and I will get right to it. We'll definitely dive into the topic, and I'll share what expertise I can. If I can't, we might invite an expert guest to come on and answer and comment on some of this. And Nate will continue your learning journey. And welcome to the world of comic books, Nate.
appreciate that. And if you guys did enjoy it, please make sure you like, comment, subscribe, all those things across all our channels. I know that I'm talking to you on Twitch and YouTube and X. And be sure to follow along because we have some crazy stuff coming up. Please be sure to head
Oh,
over to 247comics.com as soon as you can. Be a part of the journey because Bladesmith is coming.
coming very soon. Oh, speaking of Bladesmith, you guys remember Evermind, right? You remember Zero Ghost? We got our physical Bladesmiths in hand this week. Dude, like, I gotta say, Jane, let's shout out Jane. Her design aesthetics has gotten cool, really, really, really like tight, right? Because obviously this early is beautiful, and then she kind of experimented a little bit in the way she kind of designed this cover, and now it just feels really tight. I feel like we're an actual publisher now. So thank you, Jane, for amazing designs. Always a lot of people compliment this, and Mary, as always, quality wise, we got nothing but love. Look at the paper.
Ooh, yeah, and then straight to the food. That's really what everybody wants. We
Love.
just, yeah, if you enjoy good food, great story, and all sorts of craziness, please be sure to head over to 247comics.com. Click the little link that's all about Bladesmith. Join the journey. It's like John Wick meets Master Chef. That's really what it comes down to, and you guys need to be a part of this journey.